Hey guys, I'm Sid T, and welcome back to Game Development. In the last week, we got you introduced to the project for this esports season and what you guys are going to do. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to get started on planning out your games and starting out with concept as well. So here, as just a basic game idea, I'm just going to call this Grandpa's Lost His Marbles. So here, I just have a basic layout of a few things that are going to help me plan out the game. These aren't required, of course, but they do help if you're kind of stuck or if you just want to put all of your things into words. So, just a basic overview of the game. The idea is your grandpa has lost his marbles, and you're going to try to find them throughout a bunch of levels of platforming. And at the end of each level, you have to try to find the marbles to win. So in order to plan out this game, I'm going to use Drool's Magic Circle. This is, of course, again, optional, but it does help you with planning out the game. So basically, this is kind of confusing, but first off, we have mixed rules or fixed rules. Basically, whenever you go through the game, you need to have specific rules that do not change. Like, for example, in my game, you have to find the marbles to win, or else you don't win. The player cannot change that, and of course, you can't really edit the code in any way. A few other fixed rules would be like the mechanics of the game. Like for this, I plan to have a platformer sort of style, and yeah, you have to find marbles to continue in the game as well, not only just to win. So next is variable outcome. What this means is that whatever the player does affects what happens in the game. So if me as a player, if I don't decide to find all the marbles, or if I can't find the marbles, I lose. I do not win. But if I do find the marbles, I do win. Variable outcome is very important because if there isn't this sort of variable outcome, then the players won't really be motivated to play the game. Similar to that, valorization of outcome. The players have to feel like the game's outcome will be good. Like for example, maybe I'll have a beginning cutscene where like it shows how Grandpa's kind of sad and he needs his marbles again. So the player has to feel like they're trying to do something nice. Now there are a few ways you can get around this. Like if you have a sort of anti-hero protagonist, then you can have some sort of player arc, but that is slightly more advanced and you'll need to implement some story into that. Player effort is just basically the player has to put effort in order to win. If the player just has to touch a button and then there's just a bunch of cutscenes and then they win, it doesn't really feel like a nice it doesn't feel like a nice gameplay. The player doesn't feel like they've accomplished anything. So what I'm going to do is just find the marbles well, or hide the marbles well, and I might even create engaging puzzles across the levels. Player attachment also kind of goes along with this. The player has to feel like the player has to feel attached to their outcome. So in my scenario, you're trying to find your grandpa's marbles. So what I'm going to do is probably going to have, again with that opening cutscene, I'll just have the player see and sympathize with the grandpa and really want to help him find the marbles. And last but not least, negotiable consequences. This doesn't really apply to my game, but basically anything that happens in the game doesn't really affect the player in real life. Like maybe your game will have some sort of theme or some moral lesson, but it can't affect the player monetarily. So if you have a game that includes gambling or something like that, that's not really a game, it's more gambling, and that's kind of not really what we're trying to do for this esports season. And just as a side note, you will be uploading these games to the App Store and the Google Play Store at the end of the season, and they don't really allow gambling. But well, they kind of do allow gambling, but it's really complicated and you have to do a bunch of weird stuff. Just try to stay away from gambling for now. Okay, so now that I have that planned out, another thing that will be nice to do before you start coding is game balancing. So the idea of game balancing is one of the most controversial topics in game development. So basically the idea is as the game progresses, the game becomes more difficult. At the beginning it's really easy, at the end it's really hard. So this way, when the player gets better at the mechanics in your game, the game also gets harder, so that way the player feels like they're still learning and growing as they go on. Now, there are a bunch of exceptions to this. One of them is Elden Ring. If any of you have ever played it, you know that it is an incredibly hard game with an incredibly steep learning curve. However, it is still incredibly successful because of its rich and deep storyline and overall good gameplay mechanics. So, if you have a good idea in mind, like if you want to have something with a really steep learning curve or a really shallow learning curve, like if you want to just make the game more about a story, that's fine. but try to stick to a pretty linear progression between the player's ability and the game's difficulty. So in order to balance out my game, I'm just going to say for each level that I'm going to have in my game, I'll hide the marbles in harder places. So like you'll have to jump through walls, or maybe there'll be hidden areas. Maybe I'll have like puzzles sometimes in each level. And like at the end level, there might even be a boss fight or something interesting like that. So as a whole, I'm just gonna keep it pretty simple, but be sure to balance out these games as the player progresses. So all in all, that is pretty much it for you planning out your game. And yeah, so here I have my basic game layout. So now what I'm going to do is actually head over to Construct to get you guys started on learning how to start using that. So here I have the Construct page open. This is just the Construct editor. I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to start making that marbles game, so Grand Plus Marbles. You can leave all these default settings, that's fine. Optimize for pixel art. If you intend to have pixel art, you don't really need to know that right now, but if you intend to, try to leave that checked. If you don't have pixel art, don't leave that checked. Either way, it's probably better for you to leave it checked because in the end, it doesn't really do much. It just makes it slightly better. And I'm just going to open this. And here we have the contract editor. So what we have right now is a layout. This is where you'll be placing all of your objects in each level. At the left, there's the properties panel. And here you can edit the properties of the project and any objects you have. And here I just have some basic stuff. On the right is the project panel. This is where you see all your objects and whatever you've placed into all of your levels. Here is where you can upload any third-party files or like a music file or fonts, anything. This is the layers panel. You'll just use this to edit layers. This is mostly for people with paid accounts. If you have a free account, you can only have like 2 layers or something. And yeah, so here I'm just going to insert a new object. Let's make this a sprite. And whenever you create a new sprite, you have this sweet little editor. It's pretty much like Paint, so you can fill in stuff in. You can upload files. I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to find my profile picture, upload that. And once you've uploaded your profile or your files, you can also just edit them. Here, I think I'm going to give myself a little mustache. So one of those little twirly thingies. Make my brush a little bigger. And yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want with this. Feel free to do anything. It's probably better if you develop your sprites for your game outside of Construct, but if you don't really want to do that, then feel free to use just the basic Construct editor. So yeah, here I've just added a mustache and a beard, and you can drag it anywhere. It's pretty big right now. If you hold Shift while dragging one of the corners, you can resize it while keeping the aspect ratio, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm dragging it into the scene. So that little dotted box around the scene is basically where the camera goes. And if you can see it, it's how the camera looks at your scene as you play through the game. You can move it, of course. Here I'm just adding another quick sprite, making this like the sort of ground. And yeah, another cool trick you can do with Construct is if you hold Control or Command on Mac while dragging an object, you can make a copy and paste it quickly. So if you need a bunch of different platforms or coins or something like that, you can quickly just add them by holding Command or Control and then dragging them. You should hold Command and Control before you click, not after, because if you do it after, it doesn't really work. So quickly, I'm just going to add one more sprite. Let's make this a circle. This is going to be like my collectible, what I'm going to pick up throughout the level. And I'm just going to make this nice yellow. And I'm going to crop it. This is a nice tip. If you have this sort of uncentered object, then if you crop it, then it will center it. And yeah, I'll do the same trick of Command/Control clicking through all the different copies of the object I want. And yeah, I think that should be around enough. And yeah, that is the basics of Construct. Next week we'll be going over a bit more stuff about Construct, specifically behaviors. And yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a fun time planning and starting to build your games in Construct, and I hope you have a great day.